Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to the Cancer Conquering Community. And we are so happy to have a very special guest, and I'm going to not steal her thunder. Her name is Harriet Cabelly, and she's an author, a longtime survivor, and has so many great things she wants to share with us. So, without further ado, Harriet, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are. And let's start at your beginning of your story because you got a great story.
Okay, so thank you, Mark, for inviting me on again. I was on your wonderful podcast show a couple of years ago, I think now,
Mhm.
soon after I had completed my treatment, well, maybe a year out. So I'm gonna correct your word, survivor, I don't use anymore. I think what Kerry said, I think you said it, thriver. We are thrivers, right? After what we go through, we're beyond surviving. We are thriving, especially if we create our lives to be the utmost after all the negativity that we've been through. And some of us continue to go through because sometimes people continue with treatment long term. Anyway, so as Mark said, I'm Harriet Cabelly. I live in New York on the East Coast, where we have the four seasons, and now we are in autumn. And actually, it's still been quite warm here. It's a beautiful day. The leaves haven't really turned yet because it's almost been like Indian summer, I think we call it, where it's been warm into October. But now it's starting just a wee bit. And as Mark said, I spoke at Tim Sohn's conference retreat 2 weeks ago, showing up for cancer, perspectives on cancer. I spoke about coping tools and healing. So I'm not sure exactly where we're going to go with this. Let's do a little spontaneity, but let me share with you my story just briefly. And maybe some of you were on a couple of years ago, and if you're hearing it again, sorry. But I'll be brief about it. So it's again like Kerry, I was diagnosed in 22, the spring of 2022, kind of toward the end of COVID. My symptoms kind of appeared just like my stomach stuff, and everyone has a weak link. Some people get migraines. I got stomach stuff my whole life. I've had IBS, I had ulcers, I had reflux. So when mine was showing up again as stomach stuff, I just figured, here we go again, another round of gastritis. And I had my endoscopy and everything came out fine. And for like 4 or 5 months, I just wasn't feeling right, but it was stomach related. And then I was losing a little bit of weight, and I figured, that's a little odd. I'm already small to begin with. I can't afford to lose weight. Went to doctors, everything came out fine. And then one day in March, I was doing my walking on the boardwalk. I live near the ocean, which is a blessing. I mean, not right there. I have to drive 20 minutes. I'm an avid exerciser. I do yoga. I do all the right things. And I got to the boardwalk with my husband and I couldn't walk. I was like, what's going on? I do this 4 miles in an hour, in less than an hour. I can't even walk 5 minutes. Okay, maybe you're dehydrated. We sat on the bench, looked out at the ocean, which I love. Came back home and he said, my husband said, I think we need to go to the emergency room. Maybe you just need fluids. And I really didn't want to go, but okay. Anyway, long story short, went to the emergency room. They took a CAT scan. The poor, and I always feel sorry for this person, the resident ER doctor on call. I mean, if they have to tell you bad news, I feel bad for them. She didn't even know me, comes out, they're still masked 3 hours later. Now, usually when they say no news is good news, when I had this CAT scan and they said, we'll be out in about 45 minutes to an hour to give you the results. And it was an hour, and it was an hour and a half, and it was 2 hours, and it was 3 hours. And I'm walking to the bathroom a million times with my backside sticking out of those ridiculous gowns, laughing and being nervous. So I kept having to go to the bathroom. And almost 4 hours later, because I already knew something's wrong, this poor doctor on call says, I don't even know you and I have to give you such terrible news. And it's like, terrible news? I thought I'm coming in for fluids. That I had a large mass sitting on 3 organs. Oh, large mass sitting on three organs. And I had had a CAT scan of my abdomen like 8 months ago, and I had an endoscopy 4 months ago. Large man, where did that come out of? And that was it. That's the bomb she dropped. It was 11 o'clock at night. They took me up to my room. My husband's a water faucet. They wouldn't let him sleep over or stay because it was still COVID, although it was toward the end. And I'm going up myself thinking, okay, just put me in hospice because three organs, major organs. And again, fast forward, I had biopsies, this, that. Fast forward 6 days later, the doctor came back. I had gotten a doctor at that point, not just the ER person, came back and said, we have a better diagnosis for you. And that was large B cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The better cancer, as I was told, the treatable one, the one with the great prognosis. So if you have to have cancer, this is one of the ones to have. Okay. And I'm being obviously a little, tongue in cheek because cancer's cancer, heck, right? Still have to go through that hell of chemo and treatment. So I got myself a doctor, blah, blah. Someone found me this doctor on the cutting edge of research. I was treated at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in the city. So my treatment looked like this: 6 rounds of chemo, each time a lumbar puncture, which not too pleasant. And what was my biggest fear at the time when my doctor told me what my treatment would be? Throwing up, because I have this fear, and I always picture the people in the movies with their head in the toilet. And I was embarrassed to tell her, but I said, I have to tell you, this is like a thing for me. And she said to me, and I loved my oncologist. I mean, she was very Western medicine, very straight, couldn't do supplements, couldn't do other stuff that I would have wanted to do, but she was wonderful. And she said to me, this type of treatment, usually people don't get sick like that, but you always stay ahead of the game with your anti-nausea medication. And my whole time, I kept it around me like it was a part of my body because I was so afraid of getting sick. She said, if you always take it ahead of time, you'll be fine. Anyway, so I ended up being able to do my 5 rounds. The first round I did in hospital, 5 days of chemo, lumbar puncture in the middle, and then 2 weeks off. So it was every 3 weeks. I did the first rounds in the hospital, and then she said to me, Harriet, you are a good candidate to do outpatient chemo. Why don't you give it a try? And I was nervous about that, but I said, okay, I'm an hour from the hospital. It might help. I don't have to keep, running. So I they hooked me up with a fanny pack, like a little tiny little knapsack, and for 5 days it was dripping. And I had to go back in between to change the bag, and then I went back the fifth day to get disconnected. And I was also afraid that what if it beeped and what if something got stuck and I'd have to run back to the hospital, and all of these things, which I'm going to come to in a few minutes, which are in my book, was a miracle that it all worked well. And for the 5 rounds, I was able to do it at home. And I was very grateful. So that's kind of my
So let me pause you
preliminary
right here.
story.
Let me
Yeah,
pause you right there so we can understand.
yeah.
I hadn't heard of something like that over that kind of period of time. So was it a constant drip that you were getting from this bag?
Yes, it was a
Huh.
constant drip. I was hooked up Monday morning until Friday. I carried it with me 24/7. I laid in bed and I put it next to me like my little dolly. And I laid like this on my back with all the wires so that it wouldn't get tangled and beep. And yeah, so for 5 days I carried it and it was a constant drip.
Wow.
And in the middle, Wednesday, I went back to the hospital and they gave me the second bag, which lasted another 24 hours till Friday when I went back and I got unhooked. And then I call it my freedom to shower.
So you didn't have any break in between these bag drips?
No, so I had it for 5 days and
Uh-huh.
then I was off for 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
So my chemo was we'll call it 1 week. It's really 5 days the first week, and then I'm off 2 weeks. So I had my treatment every 3 weeks. And along with the chemo that week was the lumbar puncture, which to me was awful, but whatever, that's what it was. She did it more prophylactically to inject methotrexate into my spine. And you know what? It was interesting that she never gave me the stage. And I know plenty of people since I've had my diagnosis who've had exactly what I had, and they were all staged. And my doctor never staged. And when I went back, I said, "You didn't stage me?" I was just curious. No, we don't stage that. Just know it was aggressive and fast growing. So I'm looking at it and saying she probably didn't stage it because maybe she didn't want me to know and lose hope or whatever, because she did say it was aggressive and fast growing. So if I had to stage it, I'd probably say stage 3 or 4. I mean, I don't know, but she never told me. So I thought that was very, to this day, she's never told me. Even when I asked her when I was, you know, clear, so to speak, of my last PET scan. So I'm just assuming that's not her way of doing things. So that's kind of my story, and I just want to say that I went through it all pretty well. I mean, I had all my, well, I had a lot of side effects. I lost a ton of weight. I'm small to begin with. I went down to 79 pounds. That was my biggest fear, that I wouldn't die of cancer. I would die of my body would just fall apart because of all the weight loss. How would it withstand it? So that was a big thing for me. But I went through the rounds. I finished it in the time she said, 4.5 to 5 months. Thank God I didn't get the infections. I didn't have the low blood count where they had to put off my treatment. So I want to say that I put all of those things, what I consider miracles, in my book, Light Through Darkness, Miracles Along My Cancer Journey, which I wrote, which came out last year. Now, I viewed, and this is kind of one of the coping skills I used. I don't want to say, I mean, I know it's hokey to say silver linings. It's no real silver linings, but going through it, one of my coping skills was, and I didn't say this before, I'm a therapist, a mental health therapist, a licensed clinical social worker. I have a private practice. I work with people, not necessarily cancer, but people going through all kinds of adversity. So it's illnesses or divorce, a lot of grief work around people who've lost people to death, although we know grief is not just death. And when I was first diagnosed, my friend said to me, you better pull out your toolbox. What you use on your clients, you have to start doing on yourself. So a couple of the concepts was from Viktor Frankl, logotherapy, man's search for meaning, the idea that it's not what happens to us, it's more about how we respond to what happens to us. So I had to frame that for myself and say, okay, this came out of the clear. Who knew, who expected, but I quickly realized and learned most people's cancer comes out of the blue. Not many people get a warning ahead of time. So how am I going to handle this? It's not what we asked for, but how am I going to respond in the best way possible? So it was that concept that I kind of framed myself around. And then I studied a lot of positive psychology, which is the psychology of well-being and living well, not just the pathological part of psychology, which is all the diagnoses and all the problems and all the negativity, but more of, yes, we all have problems, but how can we increase and become more empowered within ourselves of using our strengths and our abilities that can keep us more afloat. So between those two
Harriet, can I pause you
foundations,
right there?
yeah, yeah.
What, how did this affect you? You're a therapist, and so you're giving advice to your clients. So mentally for you, what kind of a responsibility did you take on as far as for yourself to be an example for other people? Did that come into play at all?
Um, Not the part of being an example, not when I was going through it. Now I could say my mantra is, my life mission, if you want to say, is to pay it forward and to help others utilize and have hope and whatever. But when I was going through it, it wasn't to be a model. It was to use what I know and what I learned and what I work with my clients to utilize it for my own coping skills so that I could get through this, so that I could mitigate anxiety, so that I could bring in little bits of joy into my day and feel like I'm more than just a sick patient. So it was more for my own self survival at that time and coping, not because I want to be, I want to show the world how I'm dealing with it. Now, after the fact, I try to use these things and talk about them like I am now, or teach them in other venues of some coping skills within the fields of positive psychology that we could all use to help us, to help ourselves. And it's all about being intentional. It's all about choosing to know that we can do it. Not that, and I want to make this distinction, and I think it's really important, and it's also all part of Viktor Frankl's work. And his main book, if people haven't read it, please, is Man's Search for Meaning. It's life-changing. Is the idea that, yes, we are victims of our circumstance. We are victims that we all had cancer. Nobody asks for that. No different than someone's a victim of a drunken driver or other situations where it's completely out of our control. But we don't have to remain in a victim-like mentality. And I think that is a huge distinction and a huge mind shift in terms of how we can move forward in our journey, either through our coping during heavy duty treatment or even afterwards. So the decision, and I say it's a decision to say, no, I'm going to respond out of a place of empowerment, not out of a place of being a victim. We're a victim of circumstance. We choose our response. Otherwise, we stay flat. I mean, we stay stuck if we say, I can't help it, woe is me. And I'm not criticizing people who are there. But to me, that is the work, is to help people who are in that place, and it's very easy to be there, to come up from it. Doesn't mean you're la-di-da. We're not, running in magic sawdust and everything's honky-dory, but we can do things to help elevate ourselves, both during the hard time and certainly after, to create that more vibrant life. I mean, I could talk a monologue, so I don't want to do that. It's too much. So interrupt and interject.
You had mentioned, and I'm going to go back into your talk, and I was going to stop you earlier, but I'll bring it up right now. And your doctor had said you have the good kind of cancer. And I think what needs to be done is to help doctors realize what power they have with that diagnosis and how important their words are to the patient. I think so many of them don't realize how incredibly impressionable and powerful their words are to the patient at a time when they're so vulnerable and so uh, you know helpless, really. I mean, for instance, a lot of people say, I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate, bone, and lung cancer. And the reason they did that was because each individual area was really, really bad. And so I always have people try to tell me that, oh, it's not as bad as, like having individual cancers in each area, because it metastasized. Yes, it metastasized, but the bottom line is it's still cancer.
Yep.
And it's still cancer that needs to be dealt with. So what, the play on words, in this area is can be very, very devastating and very, very, uh, harmful to the patient because they're at a point in their lives where they're coming for life-changing, life-altering words and decisions on their behalf. And so these things that the doctors say uh, carry so much weight, and it just kills me. It just absolutely kills me how people take these powerful words uh, to heart. And so
Yeah.
talk about that.
I mean, I have to say, for me personally, when I got that news of, and I keep putting it in quotes, the better cancer, I was very relieved. Now, it wasn't the oncologist who then treated me who used those words. It was another doctor who had completed the biopsies, which he did not, he was not my oncologist in the end. He was just doing biopsies. So when he called me and said that, I didn't look, I mean, now I keep, putting it in quotes and saying, the better cancer, right? Like there's anything good. At that time, when I thought I had that large mass sitting on three large organs, and I said, put me in hospice, I figured that was it. It came as a relief. Now, I know exactly what you're saying, Mark. Words have power, and words are incredibly either uplifting or damaging. I mean, they could swing the gamut. We know the power of language. But for those words for me at that time was like, oh, I was relieved. So that again, that's just personal, based on what I was initially told. And which wasn't a definite diagnosis, and I was told that then. There was nothing definitive, but that's what was read by the radiologist in the ER. But in terms of just language, yes, language is extremely powerful. And like I said at the beginning, I think maybe that's why my oncologist never staged it, because she wanted, maybe this is just her way of helping people hold on to hope. Maybe had she told me you're stage 4, oh God, maybe then I would have also said, put me in hospice. I don't know. I don't know,
I
but
think
yes,
that
but
I think that's
language
a
is huge.
great point. That is a great point that you just brought up. I think that your oncologist who gave you that diagnosis without staging it, I think that's a much better way of doing it. I don't know. What does everybody think? We're going to open it up.
Yeah. I
What
mean,
is,
it's like the idea ignorance is bliss, you know? You just
yes,
you just put one foot forward and you go. And that's the way I went without knowing. It's really ignorance is bliss. I just want to say one other thing that it's funny because people would say, "Oh, you're looking it up online, you're doing your homework." I looked nothing up online. I didn't want to know statistics. I didn't want to know drug reactions. I was terrified. I'm telling you, that was my thing. Ignorance is bliss. And I made a card up. I did these coping cards. I have a card like a horse with blinders. I didn't look here, I didn't look here. I just went straight forward, one foot in front of the other, like a good soldier. Yeah.
George's. You have something to say?
Yeah, wonderful stuff, Harriet. In terms of the doctors, though, depends on for example, here in the United States, there's a lot of fear for malpractice or giving you the wrong idea. And so if they give you too much hope, you might, not you, but many people might say, hey, the doctor said this, and they could get in trouble. I particularly would love that. And that the person is just a little more, let's say, a softer, and at the moment of the diagnosis, we all know how that feels. And so, I really like what basically what this person told you. The other thing too is what you said. I also have a best-selling book with my whole journey, and I did the same thing in the beginning because of my personality. I was looking all over, but it came to a point that I got so confused with different ideas and different opinions and stuff. So I decided no way. But one thing I did say is that I was not a statistic. I was given a 4% chance to survival. And yeah, and it wasn't my oncologist. It was my daughter's godparent who was a tennis player like me. We played competitively. And I called him home and I said, look, get into the New England Journal of Medicine. I want to see what my opponent is now that I have the mets in the brain. So I did say that we had 4% chance. And at that time I said, well, I'm not a statistic, but if I was, I'm one of those four. Why can't I be one of those four? So there is just a lot of mindset depending
Yes.
on the patient, but I do agree. And you know, I have people from abroad. I'm from Venezuela. I have family in Spain and stuff. And when they come here, some of them migrated. I'm here since I was 18, so 78. But they always make the same comment, man. You know, doctors here are so cold, so quiet. I mean, you have no idea what's going on. And somebody said last week, I loved it, Erica, or maybe it was Carrie, I don't know, one of the, in the audience, the toughest part in my journey was, as somebody said last week, I think it was Erica, is waiting. You get the biopsy or a scan, and then you have to wait. And like you said, 1 day, 2 days, and then you start wondering. That, to me, that was the toughest one, because you're emotionally, man, I hope it's negative, and you get used to it through the years. I fought the disease for 10 years, but I get what you're saying. But we have to think of the doctor as well. Depending on the doctor, he might be adamant to say something positive, just in case he doesn't really say the wrong thing and the person has full hopes. So it's kind of like a balance.
It is.
Yeah.
It is like a balance. Yeah. And I want to say also, I mean, for me, what I think the biggest piece is missing, and I'm going to just make a very general statement, so it may not apply to the hospitals where other people were treated, but there was a huge lack, I guess non-existent, for emotional support. Huge. And when I questioned, and I'm a therapist, and when I questioned it, and they told me the standard answer at the time, oh, we had during COVID, so many people left and we don't have our regular staff. Unacceptable. I mean, for me, if I was like 30 years younger and first starting out, I mean, things need to really be put into these big hospitals. I know Sloan Kettering has a lot of ancillary services, but other hospitals, they just don't. And for me, I know, wouldn't it be nice to have someone hold your hand through the whole treatment? So you don't have to constantly call your doctor. Oh, I have a headache. Is that normal? Oh, this hurts me. Is that normal? I took this, I have this reaction. But someone who's been through it, who's a hand holder, not a doctor, not a nurse, a hand holder, an emotional support that you could lean on through treatment. That's the biggest thing I felt was missing. So, I mean, I had my own, I hired my own creative arts therapist to go walk with me through this path of chemo and whatever. And we did all kinds of unique therapeutic things, which I found were amazingly helpful. But that wasn't through the hospital. I mean, I found that for myself. I didn't want to join any groups. People said, oh, join a support group. No, and I lead groups, but you have to know yourself. I did not want to be with everyone else talking about their sob stories. I couldn't do it. So I had a one-on-one in a unique capacity who was more in the field of art therapy.
So what kind of things did you do? You had mentioned you'd done several things. Why don't you sketch that out for everyone?
Yeah, well, a few things. Well, first of all, I want to show you that I made these cards. If you hopefully you can see. I happen to like photographs. I like taking pictures and I like quotes. So this is, I don't know if you can see, this was taken, a few years ago. We went hiking in Zion National Park out in Utah, and I wrote on it, embracing strength. And the back, my intention is to allow the strength of the mountains to support and embrace me in coping with this process. And I took this with me during my lumbar. I remember the first lumbar puncture. I was like holding this. And the nurse said, what is that? And I showed her. And she thought, wow, that's really cool. I would have them on my night table in the morning. I would read some of them, and some of them I would actually take with me to the hospital during my treatment. Another one, I'm not going to go through all of them. I have many, but I just want to say a sunrise. And I wrote renewal and hope. And on the back, my intention is for the sunrise to support me in hope and optimism to meet each new day. So this was part of my therapy. I did it on my own. I did it with my therapist, but I call these my coping cards. It's in my book, but it's not for everyone. It was my way. And I think people can be creative and just do things that they feel could be elevating. The idea of bringing bits of joy in every day, even though, I was sleeping a lot and resting, as my oncologist would say, listen to your body. But during the day, when I felt good, I'd water my plants. I'd go out and sit and walk amongst my garden. I mean, I don't have a big garden, but still, it was in the summer. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to say, the silver linings. I would say to myself, well, if I had to get cancer, at least it's in spring and summer where it's going to be warm. So people could visit me on my deck, and I didn't have to worry about the winter being inside with their germs. I could lay out on my deck. So when I felt good, yes, I'd water my plants. I'd go out to places. My husband and I would go out to places and we'd sit in the beauty of gardens or by the ocean, even if it was for half an hour, because that to me was nourishing. I love nature. I love the outdoors. And to just lay all day, A is depressing and B didn't make me feel better. So again, it's connecting with what fills you and takes you out of that space of only being a sick patient. Even if it's small things, even if it was drinking my smoothie, and I couldn't have much more during mouth sores, and just I called it chasing the sun, sitting wherever the sun was, in my dining room at the time, in my den, wherever, and just sit by the window and drink it because it warmed me. It felt nice. So connecting with just little things that could be, I use the word nourishing because that's how I always felt about it. And that's how I do feel about it. That's how I live my life. But I think especially when going through really hard times, we need to do that. You can't really, I don't know if you can see, but well, my purple, but I'm very into colors. And I would put on every morning when I woke up and got dressed, and I always got dressed. I didn't sit around in a bathrobe, even when I didn't feel well. I always put on makeup and I put on eyeshadow with various colors. And I didn't buy a wig. I lost my hair. I only wore colorful scarves. And when I go to the hospital for my treatments, they always knew, what colors today? How are you matching yourself today? Again, I'm not saying this to toot my horn. This is something that just made me feel better. It elevated me. Colors to me is enriching. So, when we connect with what feeds us, it's a coping skill. I look at that as a coping skill, but we have to be mindful to say, I need to input some of the good stuff. It's too easy to just lay there and say, oh, and sometimes I did have days where I just couldn't do anything. That's fine. But it doesn't have to be all the time. And our mindset could help us, a little bit push more forward. Does that make sense?
I think what you just said is just so important for anyone going through anything. I mean, that is beautiful, Harry. Thank you for saying that. I think that, and you're right, it's easy just to sit there and feel sorry for yourself. It takes effort and it takes pushing yourself to, just even make yourself presentable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's a big thing. You know, do what you can do every single day. Push that limit for yourself and don't settle for what's easy.
Right.
Because what's easy, maybe, sitting around, laying around, feeling sorry for yourself, that's the easy thing. Anybody could do that. But not everybody can make the effort to even sometimes get dressed and make themselves presentable for no one. But you are making yourself presentable for the most important person,
Right.
and that's you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Carrie. Carrie, do you have something to say?
Yes, I really do. Thank you. Let me see, figure out how to take this out. There we go. Yes. To Harriet, I was nodding and nodding, and like when you're speaking, it goes along with something that I've been thinking about, and you're the perfect person to ask this question. I've been thinking that, like what you said about the lack of emotional support for people who are going through cancer treatment. Yes, that's that's a problem here in Canada too. I imagine it's a problem a lot of places.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm thinking of is, you know how when somebody is first diagnosed and then they're going to go through chemo, and sometimes people offer to make them like a little chemo bag with, like, candies or whatever. The idea that I have in my head is, wouldn't it be wonderful if cancer clinics, or however you do it in the States, offered patients like an emotional survival toolkit?
Mhm.
Because when when I was first diagnosed, and I know many people, you're just overwhelmed. It was me. I was talking last week about the 2 weeks waiting for the biopsy. Felt like about 2 years. But the idea of, like, what you were saying with the coping cards and the strategies, and even just in basic terms, like I loved how you said your oncologist didn't give you a stage, because when you're first hearing the information, that you sort of shut down and you can't process what's being said anyways. When I was first diagnosed with breast cancer, I got a little book that had some pretty sunflowers on the front, and it said, your journey with breast cancer, but it was not helpful in any way. It
Yeah.
only described a little bit about what the lumpectomy procedure would be. I'm just thinking about what would, if someone, and you would be a wonderful person to do this, could actually create like a template of a cancer emotional survival toolkit. What would you put in it? Because I think that now that I've talked with a lot of people over the past couple of years, almost 3 years, that's I keep hearing the same thing. I didn't have any idea what I was in for. They just hand you, they either talk to you when you're not in the emotional space to retain any of the information, or they just give you reams of side effects that you could have. And, like, I had no idea what I was walking in for. When I went to my first session of chemo, I watched a lot of, medical shows, and probably too many. And I was like, okay, I see there's resuscitation equipment. What's going to happen when they put the doxorubicin in? Am I going to, like, pass out or whatever, throw up or whatever? Like, yeah. So I was not emotionally ready in any way. So yeah, that's a long statement, but what
No,
would
but
you put in it if you could
it's a great
create?
idea to do some to put out something like that and have it in, cancer clinics or where they're doing chemo. I mean, like you, I was given a booklet, like, ridiculous. There
Ridiculous.
was
Yeah.
nothing else. It's silly. It's silly stuff. They think it's helpful, but what's helpful is what the patients need. So it really does need to come
Okay.
from us. Hey, Mark, that would be a great project. You can have your whole group create a template of emotional survival skills during treatment.
Yes,
Carrie,
exactly.
Carrie, I think that is what you just brought up is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it, but I just don't have the connections, and the, like, I've been thinking about, like, writing a little guide, but
So
what
start doing it.
what would you
Put it to paper.
okay, but what else would you put in it other than the coping cards, or the,
Oh
because
my goodness, there is
like
so
that.
much about diffusing, managing anxiety,
Yeah,
about
exactly.
bringing the joy in,
Yeah.
about being mindful,
Mm-hmm.
about visualizations. I mean,
Okay.
there's tons
Right.
and tons about gratitude, even though it sounds contraindicated. You're talking about cancer and gratitude in the same sentence, but yes, yes,
Okay.
every time I finished a cycle. I wrote in my little paper at night, grateful this round went well. Great, and believe it or not, I wrote, grateful I didn't throw up.
Mhm.
Grateful my tooth lasted. I had a terrible tooth problem. My oncologist wouldn't allow me to see a dentist. I thought,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm gonna like my tooth is gonna erupt. I can't do anything about it. I'm gonna get an infection.
Mm,
Grateful my tooth lasted. When I went to that dentist, when I got the clearance after chemo, I was the
mhm,
happiest person to get a root canal, right?
mhm. I understand. Yep, I
So
understand.
finding the little bits of light
Mm,
within the dark, finding it, which is gratitude, right?
mm,
My fanny pack never went on the bleep. I was worried about that. That's
mhm,
why in my book it's structured around 10 miracles. Each chapter, the first half is a miracle. What's one of the miracles? I know it sounds weird, but it was a big deal for me. Miracle, never threw up. Miracle, my
mm.
tooth lasted when I really thought it was a goner. And other things. Miracle that I was able to tolerate all the medications because
Mhm,
I never tolerate even an antibiotic.
mhm.
And somehow a lot of things went my way within the dark.
I think that's part of the reason why it you were able to sustain all the treatment that you had is that, like you were talking about, the idea of not choosing the victim mentality. You don't have control over getting cancer, but you do have control over how you respond. Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
So can I read you two quotes? Because I know we're going to be running out of time and I want to just read
Thanks
my
very much.
two quotes.
Let me pause you there, uh, Harriet.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of time left. We usually go to the bottom of the hour. So
Oh,
we're
you're
we're
saying
o-
till 1:30?
yeah, yeah.
Then I didn't realize. I thought it's an hour. I have something at 1:45 that I have to drive to. So I kind of have to end in 5, 10 minutes.
Okay. Uh,
I didn't realize. I apologize.
no, 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 no problem. Let's go to George's. George's had one thing to say, and then we'll go back to you, and you could finish up, and you know, we'll go from there. But that's more than fine. Go ahead,
Yeah.
George's.
Well, there's a couple things that really happen here, and we talk about the doctors and what they can do, what they can't. When I was first diagnosed, one of my employees, Julia, gave me a book in a beautiful bromelia. But this book was by Lance Armstrong, and it was titled "It's Not About the Bike." And the whole point with that book is that you own your disease, not the doctor. And we give the power to the doctor. And when I read that book, and I was just diagnosed, and I'm an athlete, I mean, I play competitive sports, tennis, which is similar, individual, he's on his own. It really makes sense to me because no excuses. And then we had an oncologist here that spoke with us about 2 months ago, and she's putting together a book about how to manage your conventional treatments with your doctors because we definitely don't even know that, and the emotions are taking over us. So that's what I was going to say. And another thing, at least where I was treated in in Miami, Florida, University of Miami and Sylvester Cancer Center, when I had not done a scan for like 3 years, a PET scan, and I wanted to take my books for my oncologist and Christina, the nurse assistant, and she was so excited to see me, obviously, and said, "Wow, my goodness," because they had me already in the cemetery, when I had the tumors in the brain and so forth. Two of them, by the way, not operable of the 8 tumors, but they were so excited to tell me, things are changing. We created that Sylvester Cancer Center created a holistic department here in the building and providing emotional support, acupuncture, massage therapy, nutrition, things that the doctors are not trained for. The other thing really would be great is that doctors will get a little more time when they're going through their pharma made curriculum they should have some more than an hour of nutrition and more of mental health type of training and emotional health. That will make them more aware of what they tell us. That was it.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Uh, you were going to go into your final things.
Oh, I just want, there's two quotes I really want to say. One is from Viktor Frankl, and this was what I was talking about, choosing our attitude and choosing our response. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And then a second one by him, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So it's choice. It's not a choice of what we get. We didn't choose to have cancer, but it's a choice in how we process it, how we respond to it, how we move through it, how we go forward. And then my one last one, I know I said two. Sorry, I lied. One more. And this is kind of what paves my way forward. It's from this actually he's a rabbi in California, and I quoted him in my book. If you have to go through hell, don't come out empty-handed. I love that because I feel like, and this is a whole other conversation, but there is like nothing after you get that clean bill of health. Everyone like disappears. And how about afterwards? There is so much rebuilding and healing and work. There's a whole world out there of post-treatment that's not being addressed. But this line, if you have to go through hell, don't come out empty-handed, is my vision forward, meaning we don't go back to our old lives. We don't pick up the pieces and resume. We got to do something with it. We don't want to be empty-handed. We want to, or as I say, pay it forward in whatever way that looks to each individual. And I think that's powerful. So that's some of what I have to say. So I just want to say, this is my book. It's on Amazon, Light Through Darkness. You can reach, I have a website, and I invite anybody to reach out, Harriet at rebuildlifenow.com. That's my email. My website is Rebuild Life Now. And that was before I had cancer, because like I said, I was always working with people going through adversities. And that was our goal, is to rebuild your life with new vibrancy, with new goals, with new dreams from whatever challenges you've been through.
Yeah, if
Harriet, can
anybody
you,
wants to connect with Harriet, just reach
yeah,
out to me,
can
and
you say
I'll be
your
sure to
email
connect.
again?
Oh, maybe I should write it in the chat. Should I write it in the
Yeah,
chat?
yes,
Yeah.
please.
Oh, I'll write it. Okay. Hopefully this will, okay. And thank you, Mark, for having me.
Oh, it's been absolutely fantastic, Harriet. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for sharing. And it's been such a long while since we last spoke that I had forgotten certain things about you. So thank you for refreshing. Uh,
Well, anytime. There was so much more to talk about,
we're
resilience
we're
and so
we're
much.
gonna we're gonna bring you back, and so I'm gonna start scheduling for next year, probably in a couple of weeks. We're booked through the end of the year, but we'll bring you back next year at another point because I
Okay.
think you have some great things to share with
Thank
everyone.
you. I'm just
No,
writing in I hope I wrote it. I'm writing in my email and my website.
Okay.
Okay.
And I share my email and phone so we can talk about holistic health.
Yes, I wrote it down before, George. Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone. I really
Thank
enjoyed it.
you.
I'm sorry I have to jump off a couple minutes early. I didn't
oh,
realize.
thank you so much. And what I
Thank
want to
you.
do is close down the recording. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Cancer Conquering Community. Be sure to check in next week, and you'll be able to see this video on our
Oh,
Facebook page. Anybody who's not a member, I think everybody is a member of our Facebook page. I will post this video this afternoon of this particular one, and we will go from there. So thank you everybody for joining us here at the
Thank
Cancer
you.
Conquering Community. Thank you so much, Harriet, and we
Thank
will
you.
see you next week.